Well, hi everybody. Glad you could make it today. And with the time change here in the US and upcoming time changes for a number of you, is usually a kind of confusing time of the year, but I'm glad you could make it today. And, hopefully the Lord is blessing you and you're sticking close to Him because the times are changing quick here. We're continuing on in our study of Peter. We're in Second Peter, um, Second Peter 2, 4 through 12 today. The title is "The Lord Knows How to Rescue and to Judge." You know, Peter made it clear that there were false prophets in the Old Testament times. There were false teachers in the church in Peter's time, and we can expect false teachers in the church in our time as well. Of course, we've seen many. But God's not to be trifled with. If they or we deny the sovereign Lord who bought us and bring the way of truth into disrepute, they and we will have to face the consequences. Now, to prove this point, Peter uses several examples of how God has brought judgment in the past and how he has delivered his faithful ones. So let's read the first part of our passage for today, 2 Peter 2, 4 through 8. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to the pits of darkness, held for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, with seven others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly. And if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to destruction by reducing them to ashes, having made them an example of what is coming for the ungodly, and if he rescued righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the perverted conduct of unscrupulous people, for by what he saw and heard, that righteous man, while living among them, felt his righteous soul tormented day after day by their lawless deeds. Not to say we're all that perfectly righteous, but I'm sure some of you have felt rather tormented by a lot of what's going on today. Well, the next section is in Peter's second letter is I'll call it the if God section. Verses 4 through 9 are one long sentence, all connected. This chapter is very similar to the letter by Jude. Peter reminds us of what God has done in the past. If he acted in certain ways then, he will do so also in our day. Now, the first if God happened at the beginning of creation, before the creation of the earth and mankind. God's first creative act was evidently the creation of angels. Then some of the angels, along with Lucifer, although Lucifer is not his real name, but we'll call Satan in heaven Lucifer, rebelled and sinned against God. Isaiah 4:12 through 15. How you have fallen from heaven, you star of the morning, son of the dawn. You have been cut down to the earth, you who defeated the nations. But you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will set on the mount of assembly in the recesses of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Nevertheless, you'll be brought down to Sheol, to the recesses of the pit. So what did God do? Well, he put many of them into gloomy dungeons in the abyss to be held there for judgment. They won't be delivered because they rebelled in the face of the sovereign Lord. Others roam the earth, but will also end up with Satan in the lake of fire. Jude 6 says this, and angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper dwelling place, he has kept in eternal restraints under their darkness for the judgment of the great day. Now, the second if God, it has to do with the flood. God didn't spare the ancient world, but brought the flood on its ungodly people, a second example of judgment and destruction. But then Peter expands this discussion to add a new dimension with the but in the midst of his judgment of sin. God did not destroy the righteous with the wicked. A loving God protected Noah and preserved his life and the lives of his 7 family members. God protected Noah because he was a righteous man. Genesis 6:9. These are the records of the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. Peter calls Noah a preacher of righteousness. That informs us that during the 120 years when he and his sons were building the ark, he was busy preaching righteousness, calling people to turn to God. Unfortunately, nobody believed him, but Noah was faithful to preach anyway. We must faithfully fulfill God's calling to us, whether people pay attention to us or not. There was a missionary in Africa. I don't know if it was David Livingstone or somebody else. They spent years and years there. I think it was like 20 some years preaching, and not one person got saved. But finally, one guy turned around, turned his life over to the Lord. And because of that, many, many others came to the Lord after that happened. So it wasn't fruitless what he did. It was actually very important that he stuck with it. Now, the third if God is the story of the condemnation of Sodom and Gomorrah. God could no longer stomach the evil of those people, just as he could no longer stand the evil in Noah's day. So he burned them to ashes because of their sexual immorality and perversion, making them an example of what's going to happen to the ungodly who will suffer in eternal hellfire. Jude 7 says this, just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them, since they, in the same way as these angels, indulged in sexual perversion and went after strange flesh, are exhibited as an example in undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. Unfortunately, people have mostly chosen to ignore this example, especially these days. But even in burning the cities and everyone in them, God did not forget Lot, the one righteous man. You know, Lot doesn't seem very righteous to us sometimes, but God said he was. I don't understand why he chose to live in Sodom when he was so distressed by the filthy lives of lawless men. But somehow, though he didn't seem to help anyone else, at least he managed to stay righteous. I can only imagine the torment that he suffered living among those wicked people. Our world is turning more and more in that direction. In spite of Lot's foolishness, God chose to spare him because in his soul he was righteous, and because Abraham, God's friend, pled for him. We see how important it is to pray for those who are in evil situations. However, unlike Noah, Lot lost his family, his wife to lust and greed and salt, his daughters to immorality, and his sons-in-law to ashes. That's the price he paid for living in Sodom. His righteousness could only protect himself, not his family or others, because unfortunately he didn't bring them to the Lord. Let's move on to our second part of the passage, 2 Peter 2, 9 through 12. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from a trial and to keep the unrighteous under punishment for the day of judgment, and especially those who indulge the flesh in its corrupt passion and despise authority. Reckless, self-centered, they speak abusively of angelic majesties without trembling, whereas angels who are greater in might and power do not bring a demeaning judgment against them before the Lord. But these, like the unreasoning animals born as creatures of instinct to be captured and killed, using abusive speech where they have no knowledge, will in the destruction of those creatures also be destroyed. So we have two opposites. Peter concludes this if God section by stating two opposites, both true at the same time. God knows how to rescue and he knows how to judge. The God of grace is also the God of all. We can be encouraged by the fact that the Lord knows exactly how to rescue godly men from trials. I'm thankful for that. He may rescue them to continue serving him here on earth, or he may rescue them to heaven. But we can count on the rescue. God is also the judge, and he holds the ungodly for the terrible day of judgment, even while punishing them now. The people of Sodom were punished, but their judgment was not yet come. An even worse judgment is coming. It's like Hitler and other tyrants who killed so many people. They were physically punished by being killed themselves, but their eternal judgment will be far worse. Meanwhile, they're being held in Hades. This is made clear in the story of the rich man and Lazarus in Luke 16. The rich man died and was in torment in Hades, the holding place for unbelievers until the day of judgment. This especially applies to those who follow the corrupt desires of the sinful nature. But you know what? That's exactly what Lucifer and the angels did. The people of Noah's day and of Sodom followed the same evil rebellion. They were living in corruption, following the desires of the flesh. Why would God destroy every person on earth except for Noah and his family, unless they were hopelessly wicked? Well, we know that from Genesis 6:5. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of mankind was great on the earth, and that every intent of the hot thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. Unfortunately, that is true of human nature. Besides that, they despised authority. Being bold and arrogant, they despised the authority of God and his chosen representatives. In Sodom, they were not afraid to slander the angels God had sent as messengers. How dare they put their corrupt lusts on the holy celestial beings sent by God to rescue Lot? It's amazing. Genesis 19:4 through 5 and 9 says this. Before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom surrounded the house, both young and old, all the people from every quarter, and they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may have relations with them." But they said, "Get out of the way." They also said, "This one came in as a foreigner, and already he's acting like a judge, and now we will treat you worse than them." So they pressed hard against Lot and moved forward to break the door. Those who despise authority and are bold and arrogant are not afraid to stand against God, his angels, and his human messengers. They don't respect authority. Well, let's look at the topic of slander and blasphemy. Peter says that the false teachers are guilty of slander and blasphemy. The dictionary defines slander as a malicious, false, and defamatory statement. It is an attempt to ruin someone's reputation out of malice and hatred using false information. Blasphemy is defined as this: the crime of assuming to oneself the rights or qualities of God. Let's see how those definitions fit the history that Peter has quoted. Lucifer blasphemed God by saying that he would be higher than God. He assumed the rights and qualities of God, which didn't belong to him. We don't know what the people of Noah's day said to him and his sons as they built the ark on dry land for 120 years. Since they didn't repent, we can assume that they slandered Noah and his family and laughed at God's prediction of a flood. We know how the men of Sodom slandered Lot and the angels. Peter writes that the false teachers in his day were not only following the corrupt desire of the sinful nature and despising authority, they were bold and arrogant and not afraid to slander celestial beings. Jude writes the same thing in Jude 8. Yet, in the same way, these people also dreaming defile the flesh, reject authority, and speak abusively of angelic majesties. You know, Peter may have been referring back to the incident in Sodom when the men of Sodom slandered the holy angels. However, I think it refers as well to people who think they have the power to slander and control Satan and mighty demonic beings. You know, that's trying to take the place of God. God never gave us the right to slander demons. Who do they think they are? Even Jesus didn't slander Satan or demons. He overcame them, but he didn't slander them. Even God's angels, although they are far stronger and more powerful than men, do not bring slanderous accusations against celestial beings in the presence of the Lord. Satan is the great slanderer who brings slanderous accusations against God's people to the Lord, as seen in the book of Job. Let's look at Job 1 9 through 11. Then Satan answered the Lord, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a fence around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You've blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But reach out with your hand now and touch all that he has. He will certainly curse you to your face. But you know what? We have no right or authority to do such things. In fact, it's very dangerous for little men to take this kind of position against celestial beings. Jude adds that even the archangel Michael, probably the greatest of the angels, did not dare to bring a slanderous accusation against the devil when disputing with him over the body of Moses. What did he do? He simply turned the authority of accusation over to the Lord by saying, "The Lord rebuke you." Jude 9. But Michael the archangel, when he disputed with the devil and argued about the body of Moses, did not dare pronounce against him an abusive judgment, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." These false teachers blaspheme in matters they don't understand. They're trying to take the place of God. Blasphemy seems to be their major sin. They're like brute beasts, creatures of instinct, who will be caught and destroyed like those beasts. Jude 10 is almost the same as verse 12 in Peter. But these people disparage all the things that they do not understand, and all the things they know by instinct, like unreasoning animals. By these things they are destroyed. They've reverted to animal instincts. And like animals, they will be caught in Satan's trap and destroyed by the very one they supposedly are overcoming. Well, that brings up then today's false teachers. We have the historical background of this serious subject given to us by Peter, all the way from before the creation of the earth and mankind up to his day. But what about the false teachers and false prophets of our time? Do they slander? Yep. They put down the work of God in the past, saying that they are superior because they have new revelation. They slander the missionaries of the past who brought the gospel around the world. They say that they didn't bring the people to the spiritual heights of being slain in the spirit and anointed by them. They're the new apostles who now lead the church toward its goal of conquering the world and its governments. When others point out how they have departed from the scriptures and gone a different direction, they slander those who try to help them and even curse them to hell. Jacob and I and many others have been recipients of that kind of slander. Are the present day false teachers guilty of blasphemy? Yes. I'm going to take the following points from a paper I wrote on the subject of blasphemy. I've got a couple of these on my website if you want to look into them. First point, those who do not hold on to faith and a good conscience are blasphemers. 1 Timothy 1:19 through 20. Keeping faith and a good conscience, which some have rejected and suffered shipwreck in regard to their faith. Among these are Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I have handed over to Satan, so that they'll be taught not to blaspheme. They've gone beyond the scriptures into new revelation and heresy, and have allowed their consciences to be seared. Second point, those who bring slanderous accusations against demonic beings are blasphemers. On so-called Christian TV and in churches, false teachers bring accusations against demons and make fun of Satan. They go to the tops of mountains to bind all the demons in a certain area. Blasphemy. Third point, those who claim to be God are blasphemers. John 10:33. The Jews answered him, "We are not stoning you for a good work, but for blasphemy, and because you, being a man, make yourself out to be God." Well, guess what? He was the only one that could do that. They made a big mistake. You know, people like Benny Hinn, Stephen Furtick, Kenneth Copeland, and many, many others in the Word of Faith and New Apostolic have claimed to be little gods or messiahs. Sun Myung Moon said that he was Jesus Christ returned to the earth. I bet he got a big shock after he died. Number four, those who persecute true Christians are blasphemers. 1 Timothy 1:13. Even though I was previously a blasphemer and a persecutor and a violent aggressor, yet I was shown mercy because I acted ignorantly in unbelief. This is what happens to people who try to correct false teachers. They're called devils and Satan and are threatened with lawsuits. Number five, those who defiantly sin are blasphemers. Numbers 15:30. But the person who does wrong defiantly, whether he's a native or a stranger, that one is blaspheming the Lord, and that person shall be cut off from among his people. When confronted with their false prophecies, they just say they made a mistake. Oops, I made a mistake. They raise money from the poor by dishonest means. And you know what? Pretty much they never repent of their evil ways. Number six, those who rule and mock are blasphemers because God's people are taken away. Isaiah 52:5. And now, what do I have here, declares the Lord? Seeing that my people have been taken away without reason. Again, the Lord declares, those who rule over them howl, and my name is continually reviled all day long. Because of the heavy shepherding that goes on in the third wave churches, God's people are taken away to follow heretics. Number seven, those who forsake God are blasphemers. Ezekiel 20:27. Therefore speak to the house of Israel, son of God, son of man, and say to them, this is what the Lord God says again, in this your fathers have blasphemed me by being disloyal to me. The Bible's not studied in context by false teachers. Instead, they forsake God and his word by following their own ideas and using verses to try to prove their points. So, in conclusion, we have to train ourselves to be discerning so that we can identify those false teachers who Peter is describing. It's very serious to follow one who is going down the wrong path because guess what? You'll end up with him in the wrong place. I've often told people the illustration, if I get in my car and you get in your car and you follow me in my car, you're going to end up where I go. Peter's words about false teachers and false prophets are very strong. He says that they introduce destructive heresies, even denying the Lord who bought them. These destructive heresies will bring destruction on them. Verse 2:1. Though they seem to be bold and arrogant, sure of themselves, they will perish like brute beasts, chapter 2, verse 12. We don't want to perish with them, nor do we want our loved ones to go that way. So, you know what? We need to stay on the right path and help others also to see the truth.